past Sunday, I was one of the members of press that were shouting questions to the president upon his return from Saudi Arabia. And one of the questions that kind of went under the radar was if the president was going to commute some of the sentences when it came to prior marijuana convictions for millions of Americans. Well, while that didn't get news, it's a question that I've been asking in the briefing room. And so today's On the Record with Reverend Al Sharpton, we're going to take a dive into that and also the Equal Act. Reverend Sharpton, thanks for being here today.
Always glad to be with you, Ebony.
7 days before the 2020 election, the president said, I'll work to reform criminal justice system. He said, improve the police force, decriminalize marijuana, and automatically remove all previous convictions for marijuana. Now, the last one, he doesn't need Congress for. That's merely an executive order. But it's a move that we have not seen this administration take. Why do you think there's been a slow roll on that?
I think that there is no reason acceptable for a slow roll. I think that the one they would offer is saying it's the politics. They've been dealing with everything from COVID to Ukraine, but we can walk and chew gum at the same time. This is a commitment he made. Let us remember that there are disproportionate numbers in the Black community that are incarcerated or that have convictions around cannabis. While now you have a disproportionate amount of whites in the states. I think it's 37 states that have legalized cannabis.
Yes.
They are overwhelmingly given to whites who can get the capital and have the background. So we went to jail and they went to the bank. And we must deal with this as an unequal, blatant problem, and one he promised to deal with. I will never forget that Joe Biden, on the night that he won the election and walked on stage and joined Vice President-elect at that time, Kamala Harris, he, out of his own mouth, this was not in a Q&A, this was not Ebony in the press room shouting at him. He, in a speech, said, Black America had my back, I will have yours. Well, one of the ways that he really needs to demonstrate that is using the power of executive order to do what he said he would do, because this disproportionately impacts our community.
And you would think, Rev, that there would even be a greater push because Biden has got a lot of flack, right, for legislation that he pushed when it came down to criminalizing those for drug use. And who got the bottom of the barrel for that? It was African Americans who are rotting away because of these unjust and biased rules when it came to sentencing.
In '94, he was the one, with the blessings of then President Bill Clinton, that was the quarterback of getting the omnibus crime bill through Congress. I marched on him. National Action Network marched on him and the Senate on this. Many civil rights groups said we were wrong. This bill, because Lynn Bias, a basketball star, had died of crack, they used that as of concern, which we were of concern. But we said it would lead to the criminalization of our community disproportionately. We were about dealing with the crack epidemic, but not in the way it was done. We ended up being right over the long term. And about 3 years ago, Joe Biden, before he ran for president, came and spoke at National Action Network's Martin Luther King holiday breakfast we have every year in D.C., and admitted that it had unintended consequences. He can now deal with trying to, in many ways, remedy what they did in '94 by dealing with this now. Because now you have people sitting up in jail. While 37 states have legalized marijuana, others are probably going to do the same. Soon it will be federal. If you want to get the record clear, Mr. President, and I've said this to him in meetings, clear it up by dealing with the crime bill results of today. and that is unfair marijuana prosecutions, convictions, and incarceration.
And to draw it home for people, I want to read just a few numbers. So the last prison project projected there were 15.7 million people arrested for marijuana offenses in the last 2 decades. 15.7 million people. 47 billion has been spent on this failed war on drugs, which is a whole nother segment. But then this is what gets me. While we have, Rev, just like you said, people that have been sitting in jail, right, for these low-level offenses, we have an industry that is projected to make $32 billion in sales in 2022. That is to be criminal in and of itself. Even you have people like former Speaker of the House, John Boehner, who sits on the board of Acreage Holdings and marijuana investment company, who stands to make millions. One who was against the legalization of marijuana. Now you're in the game. While our communities are directly affected and it is hurting families, it's hurting us economically, but somebody on the other end is making money. And Rev, I've even heard you talk about, when we talk about that, we're even being locked out of that system.
Absolutely. We're being locked out of that system. We've been disproportionately punished in that. And you have those that were not only the ones that were opposed to the legalization, but that made the laws that locked us up for marijuana possession, less known sales, that are now benefiting from it. So they are benefiting on both ends of this. And the figures that you accurately quoted, they're going to make billions of dollars in 1 year. In 1 year, we're not talking about over a period of 5 years. We're talking about 1 year. This is absolutely outrageous and it's intolerable. And we need to act like that. I think that for people to be able to disproportionately rob us of our freedoms and then turn around and profit off of what they robbed us of our freedoms for while we're still in jail is something that is unimaginable if it wasn't so real.
Locked up on one hand, locked out on the other. Right. But now I want to talk about the Equal Act, and this would end the disparities between crack and powder cocaine. And I don't think people, like, we know the disparities exist, but when you look at the numbers, so for 5 grams of crack, the sentence minimum for federal prison is 5 years. But it is 500 grams of powder cocaine, and the minimum sentence is 5 years. Now, the Equal Act was passed in the House last, I believe, September. All Senate needs to do is to take a vote and to pass it to help end this disparity. This right here, we need Congress. The other one is the president with an executive order.
Exactly.
Where are we with this, with putting pressure on Congress to move? And they have bipartisan support on this.
Well, I think that where we are is that we're not getting enough pressure. There have been only 1 or 2 of us, even in the civil rights community, that's been raising this, and I think it needs to be exacerbated in many ways. When you look at the fact, on its face, it's discriminatory. How do you get 5 years for a certain amount of crack cocaine, but 100 times more you get the same time for loose cocaine, when you can't make crack cocaine without the loose cocaine? So obviously there's an issue of race and class here. The wealthy white major distributors of cocaine, which are the 500 grand and above category, if caught, only have to do the same minimum time with you that only have a 50, I think, amount of cocaine, 50 grams. Now, this is set up in the actual inequality to disproportionately lock up the guy at the bottom of the drug trade, which are usually Black or Hispanic, while the big distributors and traffickers, they get caught with 400 grams, and they will not have the mandatory time. This unequalness in mandatory sentencing is embedded with racism and double standards. It's baked in the cake.
Absolutely. What is it that when we talk about these two issues that don't always get a lot of limelight, but the effect on reversing them can also help in closing or contribute to closing the wealth gap, right? Because then you're bringing people back into the home. You are bringing together families that were once torn apart. You're allowing people then to also come into business on the marijuana side. Like, what do you want people to know? How do we need to lean in and raise our voice on this? Because there's so many things going on. We've got abortion on, that's, running in on the headlines, of course, which is very important. We're dealing with voting rights. We've got these January 6 hearings that are going on. And all in the background, there was one question that was asked: are you going to keep your promise and commute these sentences when it comes to marijuana that can have a huge impact in our communities? How do we add that to the table?
I think that we've got to say in these midterm elections, we've got to go from just saying, are you going to keep your promise, to saying we want to see clemency for those with marijuana arrests. We want to see the Equal Act passed. We want to see this before the midterm election. I think we've got to lay it out there. We've got to tell people that are listening to us and every other platform we have that they should email the White House, call the White House, and tell them what we want. I think that we cannot leave up to them to decide what they're going to give us. We need to say, these are the things we want. When we could not get the Senate because of 2 Democrats would not go along with filibuster reform, when we could not get the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act even before the Senate, and couldn't get the John Lewis voting bill to the Senate, voted by the Senate, we told the president that we want at least an executive order on some policing. Now, we didn't go in and ask him how to deal with it. We told him, and he did it. That's how we've got to deal with it. We are at a time where it's just enough time to tell them, you want the Senate, you want the House, we ain't got to wait to 24. We want these things now. People are spending the summer in jail that could be out with clemency. People are loading up now. You have some of the state requirements on cannabis that is set up that only a white with a long credit record and a lot of money can get it. These things have to be addressed now. Part of achieving social change is timing. There's not a better time when they need us in the election, because if they lose the Senate and the House, they will be just about a lame duck presidency. The only thing that can bail them out is our turnout. In order to turn people out, you've got to turn them on. And you can turn me on by giving clemency to my cousins in jail and by dealing with this Equal Act. We should not tell them, it's like going to a restaurant. Don't tell me what you're going to bring me. Give me the menu and I'll tell you what I want to eat.
Come on. Wow. Reverend Sharpton, thank you so much for being a part of On the Record. Before we go, is there anything that you want to tell people that you're working on, or that we need to be really also, in addition to this, kind of leaning in on and paying attention to?
Well, we certainly are continuing to work on these issues about criminal justice issues. And I look forward to meeting with the president in the next 2 weeks. And we're continuing to support and put pressure on the releasing of Brittany Griner in Russia, that we feel is an example of what we ought to not let them dictate to us how they deal with international issues.
Wonderful. Thank you, Reverend Sharpton, and thank you for those who are watching On the Record with Ebony McMorris and Reverend Al Sharpton.
Thank you, Ebony. Be safe.